Okay, looks like we are good. Live stream is up.
Awesome, awesome. Cool, all right. Great, so let's kick this off. So first of all, thanks everybody for coming out to this. We're doing an AMA with one of the founders of one of our sponsors, Unstoppable Domains. Obviously Unstoppable is supporting us and HackFS. And we're really excited to be working with them and to have us at the event. So we're going to dive into probably a bunch of topics here, and just for everybody else, the structure is going to be, I'll start off with some kind of early questions, and after that we'll open it up to everybody. So feel free to, at that point, just raise your hand or otherwise just indicate in the chat that you have a question. We can just do direct questions, so that'd be cool. So maybe we'll just start this off. Brad, thanks so much for taking the time to chat with us. Excited to have you here. Maybe I think a great place to start would just be chatting a little bit about, maybe, where you started, kind of, maybe from like an educational point of view, and then, kind of like what you studied and why that interested you, and then maybe some of the first things or early things that you worked on in your career before Unstoppable.
Sure, and thanks for having me. I'm from Atlanta. I went to college very near my house. I went to Emory. I actually spent very little time on my campus. I spent most of my time hanging out at Georgia Tech because that's where all the founders were. People at Emory would just go to medical school or go get a law degree or something like that. Whereas all my friends, including Matt, who's our CEO at Unstoppable, he and I are high school friends, and he went to Georgia Tech, so I wound up hanging out much more over there for that reason. I studied, maybe sort of an unusual background for startups in general, but I studied international politics and corruption, particularly like authoritarian regimes around the world and political conflict and problems associated. One of the kind of key themes, I guess, in that arena was, issues with resource-rich countries. So there's this idea called rentier state thesis, which basically says that if you have a bunch of valuable stuff in the ground randomly in your country, then it means your country is less likely to have democracy because the government doesn't need the people's will in order to have control. So there's a bunch of oil in the ground, a bunch of diamonds in the ground, a bunch of cocaine to grow, whatever it is, that like leads you away from democracy. So I studied politics, even went to DC for a few months for grad school, dropped out, determined that that was kind of the wrong path, and that I should, there's really no change happening there, and that I should go and focus on startups. So I did real estate related companies first, before moving to San Francisco and working on a marketing software company called Talkable, which is like a enterprise SaaS software company. That's all pre-crypto, although I was spending a lot of time playing around with crypto at night.
Cool, awesome. Yeah, and I think you mentioned it, but you've been friends with Matt, who's the CEO, for since high school. I mean, could you maybe speak to a kind of I know you guys have worked on many things together over the years. Just kind of like, I think you just mentioned maybe Talkable, maybe dive into a little bit about what you were working on there, and then maybe as a good segue, kind of leading into how you both sort of started getting into crypto and kind of where your thoughts went on there.
Yeah, so Matt and I both moved out to San Francisco to work on Talkable, which is a company that another one of our friends from Georgia Tech founded. So Matt was the head of product. I was the head of sales, and then eventually became CEO. So we were, apprising similar roles here, where I'm kind of running the business side of things, and Matt's running the product side of things. So we've done that sort of mode together previously, which is pretty cool. In terms of crypto, so I mean, Matt's going to have to tell his crypto discovery story. So I don't know exactly where it was that he first read about it, although he's the one who got me into it, and this was early 2013. we were living in the Mission, actually in this hacker house in San Francisco called 20 Mission, where I believe the second Bitcoin exchange in the US was launched out of our basement, Trade Hill. And Vitalik was coming and giving talks in our courtyard before Ethereum launched. So this was sort of a hub. Matt was going to a lot of the early Bitcoin meetups, and so we were just kind of hanging out with, talking to enthusiasts, starting, I guess, back in early 2013. And we're just kind of following along in the background, playing around at night. And then, Matt decided to kind of go full-time crypto in 2016 and started going down the road that eventually led to Unstoppable.
Awesome. I feel like all good stories start with a Mission hacker house at some point. It's definitely a popular theme, I think.
This is a big one too. It was 40 people at one time. So a lot of crypto folks have cycled through there at some point or another, either gone to parties there or lived there or whatever.
Awesome. Very cool. And yeah, I mean, like when you first started kind of thinking about Unstoppable, or maybe otherwise, like, thinking about products in the crypto space, like, did you have kind of any ideas before you ended up settling on Unstoppable? Like, what were you thinking about? What was kind of like the main bits that excited you about it?
Yeah, so I think the there was a couple of pieces to it. I mean, one piece was, I guess, our group, we were not, protocol developers. We were, following along with what Ethereum was doing, but definitely were focused on trying to make stuff easy to use, really focused on the user experience piece. And that's kind of how we, eventually came to domain names, was that, there were these networks that existed and functioned and were amazing, Ethereum, IPFS, others, and yet there's really no, very limited usage of them, at least for, really important use cases, were really not happening yet. And, we saw the problem there as the user experience problem. And then the solution ultimately was naming, but the solution wasn't, immediately apparent. The first thing that we kind of focused in on, or I should say that Matt and Braden, our co-founder, focused in on, was, hey, these networks are super hard to use. What do we do about that? And that was kind of the germ. And so Braden and Matt were hacking on some ideas, and then came to, hey, naming would solve this.
Awesome. Yeah. Do you want to maybe chat a little bit about, like specifically like what that core functionality, that naming functionality kind of like enables, and, why it was such a kind of like such a great way to start Unstoppable as a company, basically?
Yeah, well, so there's a couple things. I mean, one is just that it's very hard. I mean, just like, what DNS did for IP addresses, it was very hard for the web to take off if there wasn't some, easy mapping to something that humans could remember and understand. And so, prior to DNS, it would have been pretty difficult for websites to get popular. You'd have to copy and paste a random string of numbers and hope that people would, somehow have something to do with that. That seems pretty difficult. And then I think on the crypto side of things, you have this extra complexity because you're trying to tie in all these different networks too. So the domain name can tie, 50 different blockchains together in a sense, where you can be pointing your domain name to addresses across, any number of blockchains that people might be using for payments. On top of that, also all these decentralized storage networks. So you have this problem of all these different protocols that are all being used right now and no easy way to tie them together. And domain names solve this problem. Another thing that domain names do is that they are financialized. So it's not just about them being this identifier, it's about them also being this asset. And this concept has been, well built in Internet, 1.0 with DNS, where domain names are this, prized asset, $50 billion plus asset class, digital asset already. So it's kind of like, perfect for a blockchain if you think about it. A giant digital asset, a giant digital asset class that's sitting around on centralized servers. Cue crypto to step into this market. So it also seemed inevitable, and because this domain name form factor is already understood by the world, it actually is easier than maybe some other crypto products to talk about. Like even if you don't really understand blockchains or you don't really understand crypto yet, you probably do understand domain names. So it doesn't require the initial germ of understanding doesn't require the crypto background in the same way that. So I found personally when I was first reading and learning about crypto, like I actually needed to study money, and I didn't understand money before crypto. In a deeper sense, I didn't understand, how to, things like, broad money calculations that tell you like how valuable is the US dollar? What's the market cap of the US dollar? Never thought about a question like that before crypto. So I actually had to do this gigantic deep study into the nature and history of money before I could even get my head around crypto. I don't think the same is true for decentralized domain name. Yes, you need to understand decentralization, but in some ways the parallels are actually simpler. Super long answer, but.
That was good. I think it's definitely true that it's interesting when you're building, I think, software for crypto. You're essentially building software inside of an economy that pre-exists. So you kind of need to be able to think deeply about, like what are the different considerations around price and like how people could utilize whatever you're creating. Even something as simple as an NFT could be used as collateral for a loan at some point someday, right? And you don't really get control over that. So it's good to know these things. And then I think also maybe another kind of longer form question that I think any founder could talk about. What were some of like the early day decisions that, you've looked back on now that it's been, I think, almost about 2 years or so, that were, either, really good early decisions you made? I know, a lot of people on this call and watching this later are likely going to be kind of starting their first companies out of HackFS and what they build here. So I think it's always good to know, what were some of those early decisions that ended up paying dividends down the road, and what were some of those that may have been mistakes, or otherwise just like not the right prioritization?
So I guess the one thing that we decided early on that I think was really important was we decided to build our own registries as kind of the core part of our stack. And the reason why that was so important is because it enabled us to control and build all of these different pieces on top in just the way that we saw fit. So it was the thing that kind of unlocked the broader market of tools. And so when we first started, we talked about how we were building a domain registry and this was going to simplify your crypto payments. That was a very narrow focus, and I guess you could say there was something that was a little bit off there, that we were focused narrowly on crypto payments, whereas we realized later that it's really more about the decentralized web holistically, and the decentralized web has payments in it, but that's just kind of one feature of the decentralized web, not kind of the core feature of our product and what we were trying to do. But so building these registries wound up being this core piece, because it allowed us to build a community around what we were doing. And so we have the registries, we have a community that supports the registries, that's excited about them, that wants to build on top of them, and that kind of allowed us to go and build a user base on top. We have a whole bunch of different tools that we're building. We have a registrar, like our own version of GoDaddy. That's a big piece. And then we also have web tools that allow you to build, like, you can build a blog on IPFS and launch on IPFS without being technical, things like that. So those pieces, registry, registrar, and web tools, all three together are what the company is building, but we needed this registry piece. And that was an early decision that was maybe not immediately obvious. So that's probably the biggest one to call out. I guess I should still say, like, very specifically what things were not as good. I think this narrow focus on payments early on was not as good, and also just kind of led people to kind of maybe miss the bigger picture point. The bigger picture point is a decentralized internet. A decentralized internet requires, on the regular internet, you can pay, you can view content, and you can communicate. And the decentralized web will have all of those components too, just self-sovereign. Not one of those. You need all of them in order to have a decentralized internet. So that was a later realization.
Gotcha. And I guess kind of really nice segue, I think, to some of the new stuff that you've just kind of recently announced, and obviously is also a hackathon prize for people that are building on top of it. So you mentioned that you've built up this user base around the registry, and just recently you announced a decentralized chat, which I think makes a very good use of that community that you've built up so far. Can you maybe chat a little bit about the kind of unstoppable chat and what you guys have been working on, and maybe what led to building out this piece of software, and what excites you about it?
Yeah, and so communication is a core part of the internet. We launched a decentralized chat protocol called DChat. It's the first of many decentralized chat protocols. We think there probably will be and should be many, and that's good. The core principles of a decentralized chat protocol, we believe, should be the user controls their messages, they're encrypted, they're stored on peer-to-peer storage. The domain name is the username, so that it's easy for us to communicate and find people, but also so that the username is self-sovereign. And this is super important. Right now, if you use Signal or whatever, they use your phone number for identity. Messages are stored on their servers. So if they were to get hacked, if they were to get shut down, if they were to ban you, you would have no more access to your chats, and they're not portable. If you move chat to a protocol, you get the opportunity for users to have shared inboxes. So we launched Unstoppable Chat as the first app on top of the DChat protocol, but other apps are going to be launched as well on it. And each time I go to one of these apps, I get a shared inbox. My messages are the same, my contacts are the same, and it's all encrypted, stored by the user. It's a completely different structure for how messaging should work. This seems super timely given what's going on in the world. The Earn IT Act being proposed in the United States essentially would force companies to monitor the communications on their platform. And therefore, they might need to put a backdoor into their encryption in order to follow this law. If the user controls the chats, this is not relevant anymore. So this is actually a protection against some of the encroachment that is happening by governments around the world onto tech platforms. And basically what's happening is the structure is wrong. Companies control the data. Because companies control the data, governments want to regulate the companies for what they're doing with the data, want to get access to the data, et cetera. If the user controls the data, all of this goes away. And so it's critical at this moment in history that we make this shift to decentralized systems. Otherwise, I don't think it's going to be super good for us. And us, I mean humans. I don't think that the outlook for the world is rosy if we continue to allow this type of corporate control over us. And I think it's getting worse quite quickly. So that's why we thought it was important. In terms of the hackathon, so we have a hackathon prize for building out a decentralized chat protocol on IPFS. So for those of you who are interested, please check out our channels, please participate. This is a huge opportunity. The IPFS community will, I think, go wild when we have a great functioning chat protocol. I think there's just, thousands, tens of thousands of users ready to play around with your technology. So it's a great opportunity to get something out there.
Awesome, cool, yeah. And I think I'll start filtering some of the questions from the chat and then open it up afterwards. But I guess the question is, for the future of Unstoppable Chat, like, are you guys interested in kind of, this is a question from Josh, like, planning to include like audio or videos or images and that sort of stuff? And then maybe hitchhiking on that is, also like, what does the plan look like for Unstoppable in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years? Like, what are you guys excited to bring to market? How are you thinking about this going forward?
Yeah, so I think, we definitely want all aspects of communication should be able to function on IPFS and the decentralized web. So all of the above, yes. I don't think we're going to be the ones to build all of it. Unstoppable Chat is sort of an example app for the market. Yes, our users are using it, but we think there's going to be dozens of apps. We think wallets are going to start supporting things like chat. dApps are going to start supporting things like chat. These features, browsers, like these are going to be tools that it's just a plugin. So it's going to be something that apps of all different types are going to start using. So I don't think it's going to rely so much on just what we're building. In terms of what we're building generally, though, we want to be the easiest way for people to onboard to the decentralized web. So right now, the decentralized web has, 20,000, 50,000 users, maybe tops, something like that. And that number needs to be, 5 billion. And so that is the process that we're going through, which is make it easy, provide more tools. Like right now, if you want to go and build a website on the decentralized web, your tooling is very limited. So where we're trying to be over the course of 5 years is that that's not the case. Shopify has thousands of tools, tens of thousands of tools for you to use in order to build out great applications on the internet. That's what we're missing, and that's where we're trying to go.
Gotcha. And then maybe one last question from me and from the YouTube audience, and then we'll move on to questions directly here. Specifically related to that, we chatted about the early days. The kind of idea came from improving the user experience of using crypto, and then you chatted about kind of having full-fledged of tools. Like, how does Unstoppable balance between decentralization and like having everything be fully in the hands of the user versus like user experience and adoption and onboarding and that sort of thing? Really relevant question for anybody who's really building any dApp they want mainstream users to use.
Yeah, well, I think you need to make sure that your security model is really sound, and that's kind of the first thing. So, I think all of this stuff only works because the technology is self-custody, because the domain names are ERC721 tokens stored by the user, because all updates are made only by the user, by signing a message with your private key. The whole reason why any of this stuff works is because we're relying on the security of the Ethereum blockchain. And so I think you need to make sure that that security model is central to whatever you're building first. After that, you're just trying to figure out as many ways as possible to make the clunkiness that is now inevitable because of point number one, as not clunky as possible. And so one of the things that we did early on is we have a transaction processor that enables you to, that allows us to pay fees for users' transactions. So, and the reason this is important is that if not, you need to have 5 cents in your wallet every single time you want to do something. And if that's the case, then you're not going to do a lot of stuff. And you're going to have a whole bunch of users that are going to be like, oh crap, I don't have Ethereum in my wallet. Okay, now I need to go and transfer. Okay, now I need to wait 5 minutes. Now I'm going to do something else. So that's not the way to get users to use the tech. So that's a solution. It doesn't compromise on security, but it does improve the user experience. So that's one example of a strategy. I think this is really I'll give maybe one more. So one other one is we have a pool of users who were not familiar with common Ethereum wallets. I know this seems crazy to this audience. We've all been using MetaMask and others for years probably, but that's actually not the majority of crypto users. The majority of crypto users have not used MetaMask, have not used Ethereum products. The majority of crypto users are not core Ethereum folks. The community is way bigger than that, and so we want people to be sending any crypto, using domain names. We want people from any community, crypto or non-crypto, to be using the decentralized web. Now it's mostly crypto first, but all of that has led us to do things like we created a option for you to have email accounts. So if you're not ready to claim your domain name, you can create an email account and get a domain, and then you can claim it later. Seems like a small thing. That helped conversion a lot because some people aren't ready to learn how to handle their Ethereum private key yet, and so they have other options. Now, you should always claim your domain as soon as possible. You want to take custody of your assets as soon as possible. That's the safest thing. But that can be 2 steps now. So those are a couple of examples. I would say this is probably the most important thing to think about if you're going to be launching a crypto project. How do you reduce as many points of friction? And this isn't even crypto specific. It's just that crypto is hard to use. So there's a lot of opportunities, but like, this is your job, constantly finding more ways to get the product into the hands or mouths or whatever of your customers. And you really want to just like shove it in there. You don't want to say to your customer, hey, go figure this out. You want to say, how do I make it incrementally easier every single day to make it so more and more people can adopt? Because your first 1,000, your first 100 people, they'll probably deal with whatever kind. They're your friends, they're true believers, whatever. They'll deal with anything. So the first 100 or 1,000 users are going to be very different than the next 10,000 users, and the next 100,000 users. And every single time you want to get one of these further away circles to onboard to your product, it's going to need to be even easier. So it's a constant journey towards a user experience that's actually ready for, the whole world.
Yeah, completely agree. And like you mentioned, it's the same thing, whether you're building a centralized piece of software in traditional Web 2 or even Web 3 world, right? So yeah, always be thinking about how you can iterate and A/B test and validate and everything, right? So awesome, very helpful advice. Cool. I think what I'll do here is I'll turn it over to some of the people in the chat. Just going through questions in order here. Josh, if I think you're up here first with a few of your questions. If you'd like, you can unmute and show your video as well and just ask these questions directly, if that works for you.
Can you hear me fine?
Yes.
Yep. So I had a few questions. So is Unstoppable Domains the sole admin for Crypto and Zil top-level domains?
So admin is maybe a term we would need to define. The idea behind a blockchain domain registry is that you wouldn't need an admin. So, you mint domains and then the user controls them forever. You don't need to rely on what the registry does ever again. These are ERC-721 tokens that are just in your control. We don't have any subscriptions, so there's no policy to be set longer term. So I think the best way to sort of sidestep the issue of admin is to remove any needed ongoing relationship between the registry provider and the end user.
So are there any other top-level domains planned for the future that are going to be similar?
Not at this time. I mean, we're really focused on the web tools. We think that, we have 2 registries. We think the biggest problem right now is the ecosystem of tools to use. So that's really where, the next few years, that's really where we need to be focused. So no immediate plans. It's all web tools.
What if, so we have top-level domains in Web 2, and they're managed by, the IANA, ICANN, or whatever those organizations are. What would happen, or are you worried about if they approved a .crypto or a .zil?
We're not worried. We've had a lot of conversations with with folks in those organizations, and broadly speaking, they don't see their role as this very activist type role. They're really trying to be kind of like a community good, preventing collisions. And so previously, the way to prevent collisions was to ensure this like bidding process around, around domain names, so you wouldn't have so browsers and other parties wouldn't have to decide who to resolve, which is the right one. Now what's happening is it's possible to launch on alternative technology and get support from browsers. Like, for example, we have Opera browser that resolves .crypto natively. And so they now will have an interest in not having people collide with us, because we're the system that's live with browsers. So it's actually bad now for browsers and for the internet community to have those things happen. So being a sort of conservative organization that is trying to protect internet users is I think makes us pretty aligned. So no, I don't see any issue. But I think that in general, with the decentralized web, the gatekeepers here really are the browsers and the web tools. They decide, and I think they're going to continue to expand their editorial power in this way over time. In that it's not about any one central servers that say, like, this is the official DNS record. It's about what the community believes should be supported and should be resolved. And so it really comes down to the browsers. It's kind of a, it's a different way to look at this at this market. But I think we're already seeing this develop. In general, I think we're seeing a lot of interest from the traditional web world in the decentralized web. I think maybe the crypto community would be a little surprised by how philosophically aligned they actually are. They thought this was the internet they were building in the first place. They thought they were building a peer-to-peer internet in the 90s. And they thought that they were building a system that was going to be controlled by the world and not controlled by corporates, and it kind of slipped away from everybody. And so the problem when you're talking to the traditional web community is not, is a decentralized web good? It's, are you guys really going to make it this time? People have been promising us this for like 20 years. Like, there was this alternate system, there was Tor, there was this, there was that. There were so many different people that have come to us with this story, and so we're a little jaded. That's the response you get, not this is bad. And so now we're just having to prove, hey, like Ethereum and IPFS, like, these tools they're up to the task. And this is the conversation that we were having. So we just we launched the chat protocol out of Mozilla's. Mozilla has this incubator called Fix the Internet, and they're not very ideological about which networks are going to do it, but they're basically like, the internet's broken. We heard that some of you decentralized web people might be about to fix it, so we want to amplify that. So we're seeing all these really good signals. It's really just a skepticism about whether or not these networks are actually ready for prime time. And that's what we're trying to do. And I think that's what this, this HackFS community is trying to do more generally, is make the decentralized web ready for prime time. In which case, I think we're going to see a lot of support from the traditional web community once we can achieve that.
Cool, thanks.
Thanks.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, that's part of the reason why we're running this event, honestly, is that we think it's a really good time. There's a lot of great technologies that are kind of finally ready for market launch, and really can be critical pieces of the infrastructure for this new decentralized web. Also, Thomas, you had a really good question in the chat. I'm not sure if you're able to unmute and show your video.
I can't show my video for some reason, but
no, unmuting is fine. Yep.
Oh, there it goes. Yeah, so that's so interesting. You were talking about people 25 years ago thinking we were going to change the world. I was definitely one of those people. Definitely got burned. I'm just interested, like, I totally understand and agree with user owned, user encrypted data. But it seems to me the way that the internet is broken today is that these companies own this data and then they're selling that data. So what exactly are we going to be selling if it's not the user's data?
This is a great question. And I actually think this is the biggest question to answer for decentralized web tech more generally than the technical solutions. Now, this may not be as fun of a conversation for folks to be having, but this is probably the harder thing to solve for. And I can give you a few. I don't have all the answers for sure, but I can give you a few that we've already seen. One is Brave browser. Brave browser pays you to watch ads. That and you don't. They're not selling your data in the same way. So we have already seen, one of the, first, successful decentralized web companies, Brave, building a browser, already figure out a way to start monetizing there and using advertisers to do it. So it doesn't mean that advertisers need to disappear in this new web model where users control the data. It just means that the structure, the power structure changes, and the user presumably makes money there rather than just getting a free product. So that's one thing. We sell domains. So we have a business model that is directly related to building out the decentralized web. There's also web tools. The Shopify model, I think, is really powerful. So, Shopify doesn't get a cut of your revenue. Shopify doesn't control your customers, but they do sell you tools for you to build out web applications. So that's another really big area where I think the biggest thing that I think people believe about the traditional web that I don't think is true is that users won't pay for stuff. And there's been this thesis going around in Silicon Valley that users need everything to be free and ads and whatever, and that's the only way users are going to engage with products. I don't think that's true. I think that users are going to pay for stuff. I think they're going to be happy to pay for stuff. It's going to mean that those products are going to need to be higher quality, but that's good. Like a lot of the stuff that we've been using, a lot of the tools that we've been using that are ad supported, they don't change that much. As great as Facebook and Twitter and Reddit and these other tools may be, like they're not evolving at a particularly fast rate. They're not providing new YouTube. They're not providing new and interesting user experiences at the rate that they should be. And the reason why is because they're monopolies. They're data monopolies. They don't have to be. If there were 50 YouTubes that were all competing to the death, trying to make the most awesome video app for users, and we controlled our video, and it was stored on IPFS, and we permissioned these networks to be able to have access to show it, then we're going to get far better apps. And maybe users are going to pay for that. Maybe users are going to pay the content creators directly, and applications that drive that traffic will get a fee. I think there's just so much money that's going to flow around the world when you have a more digital economy that there's going to be no shortage of business opportunities. So I think ads are a cancerous business model the way that they're structured, not the best business model. And they've led 3 companies essentially to take all of the revenue, take a little cut off the top of the internet, and that's going to go away. And that's going to expand the market. I don't think it's going to shrink it. So,
Thank you. Thank you. I'll throw you back to I'm sort of kidding a little bit, but throw you back to 1990. That's exactly what everyone was saying back then. But
I know, and that's the whole point is that it didn't work out this last time.
But now we have these tools like cryptography that might help, I hope.
And I think that when you can provide decent experiences, like you may not be able to provide Facebook level experiences, but when you can provide decent experiences that are self-sovereign, that's going to be a competitor that's going to change the landscape. It's not going to allow these data monopolies to be able to steamroll the entire world and force them to use an app where they control everything, because you'll have a slightly more awkward, maybe, self-sovereign version over here, and that's going to create the competitive drive that's going to make it possible for those to be the mainstream platforms in the future. So I think once you have self-sovereign options that are decent, it's going to be way harder for these centralized options to be able to fight longer term. And this is like a 20-year fight. Like it's going to take a long time to knock YouTube and Facebook off of their data monopolies. But I think it's important. I think it's actually critical that we do this, you know, as humans. I don't know if you all have been seeing this lately, but YouTube is now showing me Vitalik ETH giveaway scam ads. I don't know how they're not going to wind up being legally responsible for people losing money. I mean, it's disgusting that this is happening. So I think the system is just so broken.
Yeah.
That there's going to be an army of people trying to take the market away from them because we need it. We need to.
Great. Good luck. Thanks.
Thanks.
Cool. That was a great discussion. I love that. Any other questions from the crowd? We actually just recently, our videos from content that we own started being played in these giveaway scams, leading to massive confusion. So 100% agree that ownership of data is such a big deal here. You just don't have control. Awesome. Maybe we'll wrap up on a nice kind of wrap up question. Kind of any advice that you have to this crowd of people that are listening, kind of very likely at some point to be first-time founders if they're taking part in this event. Kind of any kind of advice or feedback you have for somebody who's done this before in crypto, especially just for the audience.
Yeah, I'm going to sound, maybe I'm going to sound a little unpopular here, but you really got to think about your business model. It's the thing that drives the direction of your product. And the reason why this is important is because if you want to make real change, you need to create a flywheel. You need to build a product, distribute a product, and have the distribution of that product make it easier for you to build more product. And that loop needs to be there, and it needs to be there basically all along. Like, that's what you're discovering during that first year or two out there in the wilderness, where your friends are telling you how crazy you are and your family is embarrassed whenever anyone asks them what you're up to. When you're in that phase of startup building, and this totally happens, and you should ignore all those people, by the way, as they're telling you that. But during that phase, what you're trying to figure out is how to build your flywheel. And if you leave that part out and you just build awesome tech, it's not going to matter, unfortunately, because you don't have a way to sustain it. You don't have a way, because whatever you built is not going to be awesome enough next year. You're going to need to build more. You're going to have to keep building for years in order to actually make any kind of real change. So you really need to figure out how is that going to work in such a way where when I build this awesome product, it enables me to build more awesome product. So I would solve that problem. I would consider that your most urgent problem.
Awesome. That's great advice. Cool. Well, I think I speak for everyone here. Thanks so much, Brad, for taking the time to chat with us. And we're really excited, like I mentioned at the beginning, to have Unstoppable as part of this event. Excited to see what people build on top of Unstoppable Chat, and otherwise what kind of funky crypto domains they come up with. But yeah, thanks so much for taking the time, and it's great chatting.
Thanks a lot.
Awesome. Take care, everybody.
Thanks.